Do you want more time on the SAT, but you don't have an accommodation? How much higher would your score go if you had 2 extra minutes, or 5, or 15? What you need is a time machine. Not a method to go back in time, but a way to make more time. And with MightyPrep's time machine technique, you can make as much time as you want, not by adding seconds on the clock, but by radically increasing your efficiency with next level techniques. My name's TutorPat, and I want to show you how to build a machine of your own by following custom routes through the test, by adopting guessing strategies that tilt the odds in your favor, by rewiring your own brain to make more effective and efficient decisions. So come on, time's a wasting. Let's start. I'm now in my orb of wisdom, and we are ready to begin the Time Machine Technique Seminar. Make all the time you need for the SAT. Okay, first question, who am I? Why should you listen to me? Well, I'm TutorPat. I'm the creator of the Clue-Do test-decoder system, a next-level technique for preparing for the test, inclusive of many of the strategies that we're talking about today. I'm also the Education and Curriculum Director at MightyPrep, which helps students all around the world achieve their testing dreams. And I've been featured and profiled in a bunch of publications, most recently in the New Yorker, so you can always give it a Google and find out all about me and my guru status. But seriously, who am I? Why should you listen to me? Well, the main reason is I prepared hundreds of students since 2005 one-on-one, specifically for the SAT and ACT. And my students have gone on to attend, let's bring it up, every single Ivy League school, Harvard, which is an Ivy League school, MIT, Caltech, NYU, Michigan, Stanford. If there's a dream school, my students are living that dream. And all of the techniques that got them to that point, I am going to share with you. None of this is just off-the-shelf advice. This is all the product of many years of experience. So if these are the types of schools that you're interested in, including that one, the best one, that's where I went. Stick with me. My cynical friends might be saying, hey, listen, I'm not sure I need a whole technique. If I'm struggling with time, if I need more time, I'm just going to go faster. Can't I just go faster? And here's the counterintuitive response to that, which is, no, you can't. So if you want more time, pretty much the worst possible thing, if you're really struggling with pacing, is to try to go faster. Don't go faster. Reading faster, moving faster through the math will only cause your score to drop faster. Scientific consensus suggests an inverse relationship between speed and comprehension. All right, let's put a little context here. It wasn't that long ago when testing professionals like myself and educators thought a good way to prepare students for these tests was to teach them speed reading. In fact, I took a speed reading course when I was in high school. And the idea was there was kind of an arbitrary collection of techniques that would supposedly equip you with the ability to read in a hyper-fast way all this text and then retain it. But a lot of research has happened, particularly in the last 20 years, that suggests that speed reading isn't a thing. Okay? In fact, the opposite is true. The faster you read, and a normal reading speed is about 250 to 400 words a minute, the less you understand, and the more likely you are to misunderstand what you have retained. All right? So speed reading or just rushing, raw power, just gutting it out, probably not going to deliver the results. All right? And any increase will be marginal. In general, it might even be a detrimental effect to your score. And by the way, if you're like, I don't know if this guy, I don't know. I got the receipts, man. Last slide of the show, I got all my work cited. So if you want to read more about the kind of interesting science behind speed reading, it's there waiting for you. All right, so what's the power move? What do we do instead? Well, we move smarter, not faster. We move smarter, not faster. So principles of the machine. We're organizing strategies to optimize success. So essentially, because we can't add seconds onto the clock, and just hurrying through the test isn't going to help us. We need to kind of marshal a series of techniques and pacing strategies and then organize them in a way that leverages one after the other so we get a compound effect. So the time machine is a collection of strategies organized progressively to compound their effectiveness. So they're put in a certain order so that they become more and more powerful as you move through the test. You master the skills in each phase before you move on to the next. You'll see that there's a series of 3 phases. The machine has been customized for the SAT, but you can adjust it to create extra time for any standardized test. Essentially, the order and principles of the time machine about how we're going to make you more effective and efficient, these can be applied to any standardized test that is in a timed environment. ACT, ISEE, GMAT, GRE, you name it, you can apply these principles. Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3. We got animations. All right, so building the machine, how do we build it? What are the phases? Why are they in that order? So the first phase is visualizing time effectively. Okay, so that's all the basics, like how many minutes do I have per section? Which, fair enough. And then the next level on top of that is, well, how should I think about each of those? And then how should I manage those in the subtle ways that we can kind of exploit and leverage different ways of thinking and handling time. Once we have all the basics of visualizing and managing time, we can move on to phase 2. And phase 2 is be strategic about question order, skipping, and guessing. So we have very practical action plans for each of these aspects of the test. So you get very specific, my personal way of guiding you through each of these aspects. And it's basically phase 1 and phase 2 where we're really going to be accruing those extra seconds because we're going to be moving through individual questions. We're going to be reorganizing how we prioritize and emphasize different questions in the test. That's where we're going to get those margins of extra time. And finally, we have phase 3, be disciplined and detached as you pass through this section multiple times, which I will discuss in the next slide. So you earn, then you burn. All right, so basically phase 1 and phase 2 taken together are ways that you can make your progress through the test ever more efficient, right? Tightening up your game so that we get extra seconds, right? We're reducing our seconds per question average. So at the end of the section, we have this bank of extra seconds. And then phase 3, banking the time. So that's what I just said, but it was illustrated in that fun animation. And then in phase 3, that's spending the time. Oh no, my head's covering it. It says spending the time. Okay, so the first 2 phases are all techniques, strategies, and approaches that help create, right, a surplus of time at the end of each section, at the end of reading, writing, math 1 and 2. And then phase 3 is how we spend that surplus. And very, very specific and psychologically responsible ways that we can spend that margin of time so we're collecting as much and as many extra points as possible. Uh-oh! That novelty sound effect suggests... That's right, we got a secret bonus secret. You didn't think I'd just tell you, I wouldn't give you some secret bonus secrets. Come on. So when it comes to putting these strategies into practice, you must use real tests in context and in concert. So all the strategies and approaches that we outline in phase 1, 2, and 3 of building the time machine, in order to master them, you have to practice them. That's pretty intuitive. But how do you practice them? Well, you practice them by taking full, real SATs on a regular basis. Okay, and we like to say you should take them in context and in concert. So in context means in test-like conditions, time sections, no going over, no going under the time allotments. You're sitting in an uncomfortable chair, you're not on the couch, you're not on your bed, you're at your desk or your kitchen table, your phone's put away, you have a number 2 pencil in your hand, you're using the correct calculator, you're not taking bathroom breaks, right, except for one. And you're also doing them in concert, meaning you're doing the sections in the order that they're giving. Reading succeeded by writing, succeeded by math no calculator, succeeded by math calculator. Spreading the test out over multiple days or mixing up the sections can actually inflate your score. There are many different ways to prepare for the SAT. You can use Khan Academy modules. You can do worksheets or workbooks. You can walk into a bookstore and you'll see lots of different test prep companies offering you lots of different fake SATs. Our research, our data, having done this since 2005, are pretty clear that the best way to prepare, right, regardless of the strategies you're trying to master, the single bedrock move has to be using real tests, practicing regularly, and then reviewing those tests after you've taken them. Luckily, the SAT has 8 real tests for you to download for free instantly on their website. Practice 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can also get real tests from MightyPrep if you want. They're out there. And I don't settle for anything less than the best, because only the College Board invests the true amount of research and design and refinement and that no other company can really come close to recreating. All right, time for phase 1, visualizing time effectively. Let's rip into it. The first thing we gotta do is wear a watch. It's not brain science, brain surgery, rocket science. I think there we go. We need to take control of the timing situation by wearing a watch and memorizing the section timings. That's the baseline, right? That's the first strategic move. We need to wear one of these. These are the watches that we give here at MightyPrep, this attractive fashion accessory here. Why is this important? Well, I take the SATs and ACTs. I try to, at least. I try to register. And I recently took the ACT with a bunch of students. They didn't know I was a tutor. I had a mask on. And the clock didn't work. It was a real ACT. It was the September administration. The clock didn't work, and the administrator really struggled. The proctor really struggled with the timing. So if I didn't have this handy dandy watch, right, and I didn't have the section timings already deep programmed in here, I would have been at a real disadvantage. So we never want to delegate time management to someone else, right? The first step, the initial power move, is to make sure we take the power. We take the responsibility for managing our own time. We're not going to hand that away. All right, so we're going to pack our own timepiece. A few watch hacks here. Watch hack number 1, use an analog watch, not digital. No beeps, no alarms, no screens. The reason why I'm advocating a more vintage look here is we want to remove any suspicion of your watch. We want to take away any excuse that a test proctor would have for taking your watch away, right? So if your watch makes noise, it could be taken away. If your watch looks too fancy, like an Apple Watch that could possibly have like PDFs on it or something, it could be taken away. So we don't want screens. We don't want anything too fancy or flashy. In fact, we don't want anything noisy at all. So a really super basic, granddad style fake Swiss watch here is exactly what we need. So that's the first hack. Second hack, at the top of each section, reset the watch to midnight. That way you instantly know how much time you have left. So one of the most annoying and nerve-wracking things about the test is it never seems to start precisely on time. It's like start time of 8:33.5 minutes, and then you have 65 minutes, and then you constantly, in addition to the stress of starting the test, you have to do this addition subtraction game to figure out how much time is left. Well, if at the beginning of each section you reset your watch to midnight, right? If you start reading, for example, here at midnight, you know at a glance what the time balance is. You know exactly how much time is on the shot clock because you know it's going to go all the way around to 1:05 because you have 65 minutes on the reading section. And then, no matter what time you start the writing section, you can restart it at the beginning of the writing section and you know you'll have 35 minutes. Again, all the other kids, we're going to restart reading, at this random time, and all the kids are kind of having to do math, or they're having to wait for the proctor to write the 10-minute warning. You don't have to do that. If you restart the watch to midnight at the beginning of every section, instantly you'll know what your balance of time is. Now, just as an additional pro tip, the way you reset most analog watches is by pulling out this thing here, which is called the crown. That will allow you to spin the dial, spin the big hand, the minute hand, and the hour hand, and then to actually set the watch to get the second hand ticking, we just push the crown in. So you pull the crown to change the time, to set the time, and then you push that crown, that button on the side inside next to the bezel, another horological term, to restart the watch. Last watch hack here. Don't wear it. Don't wear it. I mean, you can wear it, when it's not the test, again, lovely fashion accessory. But I think it's a little annoying to have something on your wrist. I don't regularly wear a watch, so it feels odd on my on my wrist. So I just kind of take the real leatherette watch straps here, and I create this little kind of stand. It kind of works, and then I just put it on my desk right in front of me. And you're allowed to do that during the test administration, so then I can just look at a glance, and because it's set at midnight, I don't have to do any math. And if you just follow those 3 things, you're going to be really maximizing the use of the watch and already way ahead of the game. Oh, you know what that means now. You know what that means. That is a secret bonus secret. Let's see which one this is. Love that animation. Fantastic. Thank you, Pixar. Avoid testing watches. They're expensive. They beep and they break. So you may or may not be aware, you can go on Amazon and you can type SAT watch or ACT watch, and there are custom watches that have the test timings, 65, 35, 25, 55, that have those custom timings already programmed in the watch. Here's the thing though, they're really expensive. So you should be able to get a decent analog watch like this that won't break. I've never changed the battery on this in 4 years, a really decent, simple watch. This, I'm not joking, a watch similar to this right now on Amazon is $0.01. You just pay for shipping. I think shipping's $9. So effectively it's $9. But you shouldn't really have to pay more than $9 or $10 or just borrow a parent's watch to get something really dependable. A testing watch, they can be as much or starting, depending on where they are on Amazon at the time, at $50. So a crazy amount. And they beep. And the whole point of the watch is they're not supposed to beep. And these things beep. And they also break. We've had a couple here at the office, the Tutor Dome, MightyPrep's headquarters. And they're just thoroughly unimpressive, at least the models I've seen so far. So avoid them entirely and just get yourself a penny special on Amazon, and you'll be grateful for it. So I've recreated this chart pretty much verbatim from the information that the College Board itself presents. This is how they organize it. So you have the 3 components of the test: reading, writing, and math. You have the allotted time for each, adds up to 3 hours. And then you have kind of a seconds per question breakdown, and then the number of questions per component. Essentially, if we kind of fudge the math a little bit, for reading, you have about a little over a minute per question. For writing, you have a little under a minute per question. And for math, although then it differs just ever slightly between the amount of time you have on non-calculator, the first 20 questions, versus calculator, the last 38 questions, slightly different timings, but averages out to a minute and a half, or slightly under a minute and a half. So a little over a minute for reading, a little under a minute for writing, and about a minute and a half, just shy of that, for math. And that's how they teach it. That's how most prep companies teach it. I don't think that's very helpful. I mean, that's all true, and you should know it, but I don't think it's helpful. I don't think that's the most effective and efficient way to conceptualize the timing of the test. Why do I think that? Because it's easier to think in pictures. We are visual creatures. 95% of our brain is active in visual processing. And especially when dealing with abstractions like time or algebra, right? The more we can visualize the concept, that's why your teacher's always write it down, draw the picture, right? The faster we can process and visualize, understand it, right? So quantitative emphasis on seconds per question, even when we fudge it and say a little over a minute, a little under a minute, minute and a half, it's not the most effective way to conceptualize time, especially because some SAT problems are going to take much less than a minute. Easy questions in math, for example, could take 15 seconds. So pacing yourself a minute and a half each question is illogical. It's not effective. It's better to visualize section chunks and not to think about individual questions, but what we call time per passage, which I will expand upon in the next slide. So the reading section is 65 minutes. We know it's a little over a minute per question. But the better way to think about it is that we move on the 12s. So there are 5 passages, meaning there are 5 blocks of text, either one block of text, or in one case there'll be 2 blocks of text, and what we call flight of questions after it. And that flight of questions is usually about 10 questions. the best way to pace yourself, the best way to think about it is, have your watch in front of you and you're moving on the 12s. So you should be at, if we're starting at midnight, we should be at 12:12 after the first one, 12:24, 12:36, 12:48. And that will move us efficiently and effectively through the reading section. Writing. Okay, again, we're going to think about it not in terms of individual seconds per question, but in terms of minutes per passage. Reading, it's obvious that there are passages in reading. There are 5 of them. They're big, blocky chunks of text. For whatever reason, when I think of writing, I don't immediately think of it in terms of passages, but there are passages. There are 4 of them. There are 4 passages in reading. And again, a good way to visualize it, the way to think about it, the chunks, is we're moving on the 8s. Okay, so we're moving on 12:08, 12:16, 12:24, 12:32. You notice you're going to have 3 minutes there to review. We're even building in review before we're actually employing those techniques to help you move faster through the test. So there's not really a need to reorder the passages in writing. The difficulty is pretty well distributed through the writing section. It doesn't progress or get harder. So just make sure we're on that, moving on the 8s, moving on the 12s in reading, moving on the 8s in writing. All right, math, no calculator. So we have very clearly demarcated passages in reading and in writing. We don't really have passages in math, but we do have a natural breakpoint. And the natural breakpoint is the shift from multiple choice questions to student-produced responses, commonly called grid-ins, right? So that's the kind of point where we're going to be marking our own progress by. And basically, the idea is we want to get to question 16 in 18 minutes. Okay, so 16 by 18 minutes, because we want to save a bank of at least 7 minutes for the student-produced responses or the grid-ins. There's one very good reason for that, which is the difficulty level resets when I get to the grid-ins. Math is broadly progressive, meaning broadly, not real finely or precisely, but broadly, as you move through the test, it gets a little trickier. But the difficulty level resets when I get to the grid-ins. So obviously, I want to save or bank time because I want to pick up those easy and medium level questions when I get to the grid-ins. I don't want to blow all my time and then have to race through the grid-ins. And if you're not careful, that can happen, right? That's why we want to make sure by question 16, we have spent only 18 minutes, so we have a nice bank of 7 minutes to give careful and full consideration to my grid-ins, because there'll be some easy points there. Math calculator. We're going to just apply the same theory in using the multiple choice to grid-in break as a natural demarcation here. Another visual where we want to be in question 31 by 43. And we can even simplify that by basically saying in 40 minutes, I need to be at question 30, essentially, right? And the reasons for that are the same as those I outlined for non-calculator, which are the difficulty level resets for our student-produced responses, and I want to pick up those easy points, so I don't want to overspend my time in the multiple choice and have to sprint through and lose opportunity in my grid-ins. All right, it's phase 2. I'm jazzed. All right, phase 2 is being strategic about question order, skipping, and guessing. Actual action plans, strategies that we're going to employ to really rack up those surplus seconds. So within individual sections, we're going to start, by the way, with question order. Within individual sections, you can answer the questions in whatever order you want. You cannot disorder the sections. You cannot do math before reading. You cannot do writing before reading. You can't do reading after math. All the different combinations. A little combination problem there for you. You have to go in the order. And by the way, you cannot revisit. And in fact, the most common form of cheating on the SAT that is caught are students who are disordering the test or returning to a section after time has been called on that. So I am not advocating that. I want to be perfectly clear here. What I am advocating is within a section, You can reorder questions any way you want. You do not have to go from question 1 to 52 in reading. You do not have to go from question 1 to 35, or 1 to 44. It's 35 minutes, 44 questions in writing. In fact, disregarding the test order has significant advantages. Every question is equal, i.e. hard questions are not worth more than easy ones. So I said one kind of principal bedrock assumption for test prep is always practicing regularly in a timed fashion using real SAT tests. I said another bedrock principle is making sure that we are prioritizing easy and medium questions. Okay, you'll hear that from a lot of different tutors. But there's an implicit assumption there that you know what questions are hard and easy. In school, hard questions are often worth more than easy questions, right? If I'm taking them in a pre-calculus class, usually, the last question on my final will have like lots of different steps and I can get partial credit, and it's worth a lot more than the easier gimmies that are at the beginning of the test. SAT, any standardized test is not like that. There's a radical equality of all questions. So it makes sense from a strategic point of view that we're going to do the easy and mediums first. But as I said, that's assuming you know which ones are easy and medium. So can you tell by the order of questions? Again, on our school tests in high school, usually the harder questions are at the end, and the easier questions, the gimmies, are at the beginning. And oh, that's a sad face. That indicates that, really, right? There's no linear progression of difficulty in reading and writing. And I've already said that, right? The discriminators, the really hard questions, they're kind of evenly mixed in reading and in writing. I just got a text. Parents, they'll text you even when you are an old person. So just flagging that out there for you. Hi, Dad. There is a faint linear ramp up of difficulty in math, but it resets when you shift from multiple choice to student-produced responses. Already said that as well. Moreover, easy and medium level can be subjective assessments reflective of students' individual strengths and familiarity with the SAT. The argument I'm effectively making is that easy and medium are difficult categories just to assign. So when a teacher or a tutor says, just do the easy and medium ones first, that's very imprecise. That's very imprecise, and we need a better vocabulary and a more specific taxonomy. AP Bio, what's up? If we want to be truly effective in the testing situation. So power move, we need to master question types. So becoming highly effective on the SAT, becoming a 1600 level student is less about knowing the answers and more about knowing the questions, knowing the question types. Okay, so look at these birds. Are these birds great? SAT questions are a bit like birds. Each one is a member of a species. They're not one-offs. There's no one-off bird. There's not a unique bird. I mean, I guess the last dodo was technically a unique bird. But in general, the birds you see, they're not unique. They are part of a species, right? And those species are characterized by specific attributes that you can visually identify, right? So the SAT questions are the same. They have their own species or question types, and each one has its own quirks and characteristics. Once you figure out the question type, you will know. There's a little typo for you. You figure out the question types, and you will know, I think that's what I meant to say, what to do and how much time you should be spending. So what I'm trying to pivot away from is thinking about terms of easy, medium, and hard, and being more specific in thinking about specific question types. Okay, and here, and my face is totally blocking that, but that's essentially what the Cluedo system is. So if you remember from the introduction, I said, I am the creator of the Cluedo test decoding system. Cluedo test decoding system is one way, I believe the most efficient, precise, and effective way to categorize SAT questions and to tell you how to answer every single one. So that instead of looking at this picture of totally random birds, you'll be like, boom, 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 boom. You'll be able to identify each of those birds and know how to handle each of those birds, okay? So that's what the Cluedo system is. It looks, there's the clue, and it's like, okay, that has a black head, that has an orange wing, that has a yellow tail, boop, 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 boop. That's a candy pants. Oh, we'll do that again. Candy pants. I'm not sure candy pants is an actual species of bird. Actually, I am sure it's not. But the idea is there are visual cues either in the question stem, that's the actual question itself, the answer menu, A, B, C, or D, or in the passage that will alert the trained test taker to exactly what species or question type you're looking at. And I put down there at the bottom, that's actually what our clue-do decoder looks like. It actually gives you the clue. It tells you what concepts it's related to, and it tells you exactly what to do. Obviously, I want you to use the clue-do system. I want you to take our course. I want to tutor you personally. But there are many different ways you can categorize them. They're not as good. But becoming a really effective test taker, becoming a really quick test taker, is predicated on the idea that you can identify question types and that you know which question types will take you longer and which question types you can move much more quickly through with a higher degree of effectiveness. Because the next power move is to create a trap map. So what is a trap map? A trap map is a custom order of question types tailored to each section where your time traps are pushed to the back. So while the clue-do system allows students to identify question types precisely and instantly, students still new to the SAT can identify time traps after taking a couple practice tests. So even if you don't know the clue-do system, even if you're just taking a couple practice tests, you can kind of identify question types. Not all of them, but many of them, and you'll know which ones suck. So you'll be able to create something that looks like this. And I'm going to move my face over here. Oh, no, that's not my face. Sorry. Still learning, guys. We're always just learning. Okay, I'll move my face over there. And I'll show you. No, I'm getting tiny. Okay, there we go. So you can do something like this. You can create a trap map. This is for writing, and I'm using question types that we use as part of the clue-do system, but you can name these question types whatever you want. But in the first pass, the initial pass, I would go through and I'd answer all those that I know I can identify easily and I can answer easily. For me, in this example, be grammar questions involving punctuation, syntax, and parts of speech. Then the second time I go through this section, I would answer my rhetoric questions, my most effectively or best, my yes, yes, no, no's, my most effectively combination questions. My third pass I reserve for the balance, which would be, in this case, rhetoric, sentence placement, rhetoric, diction, rhetoric, repetition. So what am I suggesting you do? I'm suggesting you create a trap map and you reorder the questions in an individual section based on the question type and your individual strengths with those question types, right? So to be really efficient and effective, we want to do the easy and mediums, and the easy and mediums will be those questions you've identified ahead of time as ones you can consistently identify, you know what to do, you have a high likelihood of getting it right, and we're going to be pushing all those question types to the back, to the end of our trap map, because just because they're harder doesn't mean they're going to net us any more points, and I want to spend as more time doing the more readily attainable points. Obviously, knowing something like the clue-do system that can identify every single question type and gives you very clear identifiers and markers for each question type and tells you in clear language exactly how to address them, that's going to be easier. But even if you don't have access to the clue-do system, just taking a couple of practice tests and giving your own names to different question types, just looking at them and not even identifying all of them, but most of them, and then organizing exactly how you're going to approach is going to radically increase your efficiency. Okay, so what is the next thing? Well, the next thing we have to talk about is skipping. And when we should skip a question and how we should think about skipping. And the bedrock principle here at skipping is a idea from behavioral economics called the sunk cost fallacy. And I will illustrate the sunk cost fallacy by way of an anecdote. So in the 60s, the governments of Britain and France decided to come together and build a supersonic jet that would do transatlantic flights from New York to London and Paris. And they spent just mad amounts of money to build this jet, like insane amounts. And as they're building it, even as they were constructing it, accountants and various government officials were coming back and being like, there are very, 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 very low odds here that we'll be able to recoup, we'll be able to make back the money we spent in development by selling plane tickets to these jets, because the jets couldn't hold that many people, okay, and they were really expensive to operate. So the idea that they would be a profitable alternative over a normal jet in ferrying passengers from New York to LA and Paris was pretty low. But at every turn, officials were like, but we've already spent all this money, so we might as well just build it. That literally was the logic. So they build the jets, and they fly the jets, and they fly the jets for like 30 years, and they never make any money. They cost the governments of Britain and France millions of francs, pounds, and later euros. Right? So there was never actually a rational reason to build this jet. There was never a rational reason to fly the jet. It was costly, and it was a boondoggle from the beginning. Why did they do it? Why did they do it? Well, they did it because of a very pernicious and powerful habit within our own brain called the sunk cost fallacy. So time is an investment, and humans are not rational about investing. People will often continue an endeavor, even with no reasonable expectation of return, to redeem their initial or continuing investment. Again, think of the guys building the Concorde. They're like, we've already spent all this money, we just have to keep going. In general, we like to think we make decisions on future benefit. I'm going to study so that in the future I'll have a higher SAT score, right? But the reality, and this guy here, Richard Thaler figured it out, is we often are making decisions not based on future benefit, but on past investment. And that's a terrible standard on which to make a decision. How does this fit within the SAT? Well, it means the more time you spend on an SAT problem, the less likely you are to abandon it, even if it costs you the opportunity to move on to easier questions. Right? So the engineers building the Concorde, the people in toxic relationships, our own brain looking at an SAT problem, the more we work on it can become a justification to just keep working on it. In fact, that's the way our brain is disposed, right? That is the preset for our brain. If we're working on a problem, our brain is just going to continue working on the problem because they're like, well, we've already spent so much time. If we abandon it, that'll be terrible. Even though the most that problem could ever net us is 1 point. And as I said, Richard Thaler say this in depth, and he won the Nobel Prize. This is a Nobel Prize-winning insight. There's a Nobel Prize. Yeah, it comes with $1 million. Thought I'd throw a little ka-ching in there. So how can we apply these insights, and how can we force our brain to make more rational and more rapid decisions in the testing context? Well, the power move is 30 seconds and out. So if you are looking at a problem and you cannot identify the question type, or you are not on for example, the math path, you're not actually, solving it, you're not actively engaging and on the way to a solution, you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you got to get out. You got to skip it and move on. You could, if we build the time machine, you'll have time to revisit it. You'll have time to reconsider it again. But if you are not actively solving a problem within 30 seconds, you got to jump and skip. Sometimes I'm asked, what is the big difference when I sit down and take the test versus when a typical high school student does? For example, when I took that ACT in September. And I would say the biggest actual practical difference is that I'm much more ruthless about skipping. I don't have an overriding commitment to any one particular question. If I can't immediately identify it and I can't immediately jump into a solution pathway, right? If I'm stuck after 30 seconds, I have no problem just dropping it and moving on. And that actually takes a fair amount of discipline because our brain doesn't want us to do that, right? Our brain is very much entangled in the sunk cost fallacy. Like, all we need is more time. All we need is more time. All we need is more time. And you got to shut that down. You got to shut that down and really cultivate yourself a 30-second timer, half a minute, that if we're not in it, if we can't see the light, we're going to skip and we're going to come back. It's going to be okay. But we don't have to be beholden. This idea that we're going to buckle down, gut it out, and figure it out, more often than not, burns valuable time and robs us of the opportunity to get easier questions later on. All right, guessing. Guessing. So we talked about a strategy for reordering, creating a trap mask based on time sucks and question types. We've talked about a skipping strategy, which is 30 seconds and out, because we don't want the sunk cost fallacy to undermine our efforts. Now we're going to talk about guessing strategies. So most important point here, another bedrock principle, is we never leave a question blank. We never, ever, ever leave a question blank. There is no wrong answer penalty on this test, meaning if you have a wrong answer, they're not going to deduct more points. They used to do that. And the odds are fantastic. The odds are fantastic. So in general, there are 3 guessing techniques, which I have correlated with some emojis. We have Christmas treeing. We have consistent guessing. And we have reduction guessing. All right, what is Christmas treeing? What is it? Christmas treeing is just going and doing this, right? Random bubbling. Why it sucks? Well, there are a couple of reasons, actually, why, if we're going to guess, guessing randomly by just Christmas treeing down like that is not good. One, it actually takes more time. It takes more time to randomly scribble in bubbles. Takes time because your brain has to like figure out a pattern, and then it seems slightly counterintuitive, but it actually takes more time. And it's not really leveraging odds in our favor because when we're randomly guessing, we're actually not. Our brain will default to a pattern, and that pattern might not necessarily leverage the odds in the best possible way. So it takes time, and it's not going to do us any favor statistically. So that's why it gets a big meh. Consistent guessing. What is consistent guessing? Consistent guessing is just having a lucky letter and always guessing that letter. There are debates online. There are debates on Reddit. There are debates amongst tutors whether there's one particular letter A, B, C, or D that is predisposed to more often being correct when applied. The math on this is fairly clear. There isn't. Now, there are tutors. There are tutors, including ones I respect, that are adamant. And one says, it has to be A, always choose A. The general default is C. One of the most popular questions I'm asked is should I always guess C? It doesn't matter. If you want to use consistent guessing, pick a letter A, B, C, or D, and every time you guess, you apply that letter. It's okay. You're going to be statistically, 1/4 of the time, on average, if we increase the test infinitely, you're going to get 1/4 of those answers correct. You're not going to be defaulting to some weird idiosyncratic pattern in the way you would with Christmas treeing. So I think it's totally fine. A, B, C, or D. If you want to, you can go with A, but know that the math really says they're all equally weighted. So that's a good strategy. Reduction guessing. Yes. All right. What is it? Reduction guessing is essentially next level guessing, which is before we guess, can we eliminate one wrong answer? Before we guess, can we eliminate one wrong answer? So as I said, the odds, even with 4 answers, are pretty good. That's 1 out of 4. But if we can get to 1 out of 3, those are amazing odds. And 1 out of 2, oh my gosh, that's better than most Vegas odds. 50% coin flip? Are you kidding me? So how do we know which answers are 100% wrong? Well, clue do. So if you are familiar with a question identification system like the Cluedo test decoding system, you not only can identify what kind of question type it is, you also will know what the most common wrong answers are. For example, in writing, there's one question type called logical relationship, and trained test takers will know what my potential right answers are, and they'll know what my wrong answers will look like too, right? So you'll be able to immediately apply that. So reduction guessing is great. That's where we're going through, and before we make our guess, we try to see if we can identify at least one wrong answer to make it a 1 out of 3 guess, which is dramatically better odds. 2 wrong answers, 1 out of 2, that's 50% odds. That's really the best way to do it. And we can really do that when we're trained in question identification, because question identification just doesn't end with the question stem. also identifies patterns within the answers, the right answer and the wrong answers as well. Friends, Romans, countrymen. We have another secret, bonus secret. It's a gray background this time. What do we got? Aha! I know what that sound means. That's bubbling strategies. Okay, so there are basically 3 ways we can bubble. I'm asked this a lot. We got conventional bubbling. Conventional bubbling is just like I answer the question, I identify the answer, I bubble in the answer. I answer the question, I identify the answer, I bubble the answer. Again, it's just mechanically inefficient because I'm doing this all the time. Generally, I'm not a fan of just bubbling individual questions as you go. That's not the best way we can do it. There's something called shift bubbling. Shift bubbling is, as I'm going through the test, I'm identifying the correct answer by circling it and writing the letter. Okay, so I'm not even touching the Scantron. I'm not actually touching the sheet where I bubble in my answers until the end of the section. All right, and this particularly works well if we've built a time machine and we're doing the pass system, which I'll talk about in the next section. All right, so shift bubbling is just I identifying the right answer either by writing the letter along the side or starring it if I've guessed, and then I'm going through and waiting to the very end to bubble all of them at once. The other option is something called bubbling the spread, which is kind of like a compromise between the two, between conventional bubbling and shift bubbling. The only downside of shift bubbling is if I'm not a trained test taker and I haven't built a time machine and I haven't employed all these economizing techniques to make me move more expediently and efficiently through the test, and I wait to bubble at the end and I don't have time at the end, I can be in a world of hurt, right? So bubbling the spread basically is just cutting that down. A spread is just 2 pages, right? So as we're opening the test booklet, we're always looking at 2 pages in front of us. And bubbling the spread is I answer all the questions on those pages. I'm writing the letter choice on the side of each of the answers, or I'm starring or circling if I'm guessing. And then before I turn the page, before I move to the next spread, I bubble that all the time. And that can be as many as 10 questions or as few as 4 if I'm in the reading and there's a passage or there's a particularly large figure in math, right? But I'm always bubbling the spread. So I'm not waiting to the end to bubble, but I am bubbling in groups, which is a little bit more efficient, and I'm economizing my time. So there you go. Those are your full bubbling options. We did it. We made it to the final phase, phase 3, to be disciplined and detached to pass through the section multiple times. Let's see. Let's get to it. Okay. So this is all leading to the pass system. The whole reason that we earn, right? We build up those surplus seconds through guessing if we don't know the question type or we're not on the answer pathway after 30 seconds. The reason why we create our trap maps by identifying time sucks and question types that give us trouble. The whole reason we do that, we're reorganizing the test and changing our own behavior, is so that we can build a surplus of time at the end of each section so that we can revisit the section. Now, how big that surplus is dependent on how well you have mastered the strategies I've outlined and what section you're in, right? So a super advanced test taker can have surpluses as big as 10 or 15 minutes, again, depending on the section. But even someone just recently starting out, just beginning to employ these techniques as they take their regular, full, real timed practice test, you'll begin to build up a surplus of 2 minutes, and then 3 minutes, and then 4, and then 5. And once we kind of have earned it, then we can figure out how to burn it. And we burn it with the pass system. So the first pass is you proceed according to the trap math, prioritizing easy and medium level questions, 30-second or less rule in effect. So that's basically what we've outlined in phase 1 and 2, going look for those economical questions that we can get through with a high degree of accuracy that we can identify with, that we don't have to spend enormous amounts of time on. And if we're stymied or stuck, at 30 seconds we drop it, we continue moving on, right? Excellent. So that's the first pass. The second pass is we revisit skipped or questionable questions, right? Those that we couldn't identify readily, those that took longer than 30 seconds, those that we answered but we were a little less sure of, and we're going to reread that question stem carefully. The 30-second rule, though, is still in effect. That's the kind of key distinction I want to make here. Just on the second pass, that doesn't mean all bets are off and we can spend as much time as we want. We can really wrestle in it. Nope. Second pass, we're still sprinting through it. We're still looking at it in 30 seconds. That's okay. That's okay. If we feel that panic, like I got to answer this right now. No, you don't. No, you don't. Consider it for 30 seconds. If it doesn't illuminate, if the lights don't go on, if you don't see a pathway to the right answer, keep going because we have that third pass. All right, third and fourth, fifth passes, subsequent passes. Only then should we be able to sit and really spend time, because by then, hopefully, we reduced our pile of problematic questions down to a really tiny handful. In fact, in the first pass, the ideal goal is to get through 80% of the test. Second pass is to get through 15% of the test. Third pass, that 5%, right? We're looking at that 1, 2, 3 questions, and then we should have enough time to sit with those to kind of unpack those and see what's going on. What's the goal? The goal is to give your brain as many fresh attempts to recognize a troubling problem. The test is never surprising, only confusing. And I want to kind of noodle on that a little bit. So if we take the analogy of the birds as questions are birds, a species of birds, it's always the same damn birds. Darn birds. It's always the same darn birds. They might be moving a little faster. They might be moving a little slower. You might see them from this angle. You might see them from that angle. But it's always the same birds. So the birds might confuse you, but they'll never be different birds. If it's always, sparrows, cardinals, and toucans, they're never, ever going to throw in a warbler. I really had to stretch for a fourth bird there, guys. Right? So once we are familiar with the question types, once we're familiar with the curricular confines of the test, the SAT is a closed system. They rewrote the test in 2015. They said, these are the ideas that we're going to play with. This is our sandbox. And they don't go outside their sandbox. They don't introduce new birds. Right? So if you're looking at a question and it is not conforming to your expectations, you are probably looking at it wrong. You are probably misreading it. And the whole point of the pass section, or the pass method, is to give your brain many different opportunities, many different angles to revisit and notice what your brain is missing. Because the test is never surprising. There's never going to be a rare bird. There's never going to be a new species of question that's introduced in this test and only in this test, and Pat has been lying to you, and there's actually, variable forces at play, and they've rewritten the rule book for just this one test. Doesn't happen. It's the same ideas. It's the same question types. It's the same patterns. It's the same rules. They have a word for that. It's standardized. That's what standardized means, right? Standardized means everything is brought to a homogenized standard, and it's going to be the same thing for the December administration as for the March, as for the May, as for the June, as for the August, as for the October, as for the November. All right. So the pass system allows our brain to have a little bit of a break. If you notice, one of the themes is of this of building the time machine is to modulate your brain, to give your brain a break to go do something else and return. I don't know about you, but for me, if I'm looking at something and I can't see it, staring at it and staring at it and staring at it and spending more and more time isn't the way to pick out what I'm missing. There are some people like that who just have to really narrow it down. Not for me. If there's something I'm missing, if there's a word I'm missing, if there's something I'm stuck on, if there's something that's not clicking, I got to go away from it and come back. Because only when I come back do I be like, I was solving for X, they want it for Y. It says not there. It says not. Often it's all uppercase, and yet my brain totally edited it out. That happens. But I won't see that unless I walk away and come back. And sometimes I have to walk away and come back a couple of times. Not physically walk away, can't leave my desk, right? But leave the question and revisit it. That's the genius of the past system. Once you build the time machine, the more you practice it, the better it runs. That's, again, highlighting the importance of doing real full-timed practice tests, right? Because we can build that trap map, which takes a while to identify the question types, to be able to see them on site, and then to organize a list of the ones that we get more regularly correct than the ones that give us trouble, right? So we can kind of craft a custom route through each section. Similarly, it takes a while to develop the discipline to leave a question after 30 seconds if we're not getting it. It sounds easy. It sounds like a lot of things in logic. It sounds easy. Yeah, of course. On paper, that makes sense. It's very quite difficult sometimes to habituate that habit, right? To develop the discipline. So it might not be the question of how many passes do you need. It's how many passes can you make happen, right? How much time can you bank before you burn it? How much can you earn through the institution of the techniques we've already discussed? That will allow you and facilitate as many passes as you can do. Scholars debate. The challenge is developing the discipline and detachment to pass through the questions at all. So I've already touched upon the discipline end of it. The discipline of being able to tell your brain, hey, knock it off. We're not spending any more time on this. And by the way, your brain's horrible. Your brain, it will tell you things like, oh, you're a real dum-dum if you don't figure this question out. At least my brain does. My brain's dark like that. Oh, you're a tutor if you can't get it on the first pass. You're terrible, right? And I just quiet those voices and I just say, listen, 30 seconds. If I can't see the light in the tunnel, if I don't know exactly what kind of bird I'm looking at, I'm going to come back. I'm going to give my brain another chance to reorient itself, another chance to recognize the concepts at play here. That's the discipline. And what's the detachment? Well, and this is getting to like real next level, upper level stuff when we talk about really high performers on the test. So truly high performance requires an enormous amount of emotional detachment. Emotional detachment means that we are entirely intellectually invested in this test and we are focused on the questions in front of us, but we're keeping our emotions in check. We're keeping our panic in check. We're keeping our stress in check. We're keeping our fatigue in check, right? That's what detachment is. And detachment, at least in my experience of working with, hundreds of students, one-on-one, is that detachment only comes through practice. You cannot be detached, right? You cannot remove yourself from an activity unless you've done that activity so many times, right? And until you've really lost yourself in the rhythms of that, and until you've internalized that activity. That's why all of our students take a minimum of 10 full SATs before they sit down for the real one. A minimum of 10. And I've had many students do as many as 30 SATs, ACTs even more because there are more released ACTs before they sit down for the real one. Because to allow them to internalize all the rules, for them to develop those techniques, to them to hone their focus, for them to really build those time machines so that they can take as many passes as they want, right? And they never freak out and be like, oh, this test is different. That's the great threat, right? Discipline we talked about. The detachment is the self-awareness that enables you to avoid panic guessing, doubting strategy, and resisting making exceptions to the rules of testing. That's the great thing. That you would break habit. In the Cluedo system, we go over all the best practices and key techniques, and students absorb them, and it's great. But if you don't have the detachment, right? If you don't have some sort of critical distance between you and the test, you can stress out and you can throw all that out the window. All that wisdom, all those weeks of training, you can throw it out the wisdom if you panic, right? And you respond emotionally and not intellectually and rationally, right? So that is the real secret to building the time machine, the real secret to having as much time as you need on the test is repetitive practice. Right? Repetitive practice with an eye developing the discipline of technique and the emotional and psychological detachment of approach. And if you can master that, which are considerable achievements, the SAT, easy. Summary. We taught you how to use a watch effectively. That was fun. I sketched out really specifically how to visualize time per section and per passage. If you don't have it already, you can download our beautifully illustrated SAT timing guide that has all those pictures and more, and it's just gorgeous in one single sheet. How to identify time suck questions, either informally through your own method that you develop by taking practice tests, or using a question identification method like the Cluedo test decoder method, and building a trap map, i.e. Prioritizing easier and medium level questions that don't take as much time and that you have a higher chance of getting right over those that take a lot of time and you often get wrong. Knowing exactly what the sunk cost fallacy is, right? That Nobel Prize-winning insight that talks about how our brains are not wired to make choices based on future outcome, but rather are predisposed, right, to keep investing time and energy based on past investment, and how we can counteract that by developing a sense of discipline and a 30-second or out rule. That if we don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, if we haven't correctly identified the question type, or we're not in an active solution pathway, we're going to skip it and come back later. 3 guessing strategies. One that's terrible, that would be Christmas treeing, and one that's okay, that's consistent guessing, and then one that's better, that's reduction guessing, where we're using our knowledge of question types and common wrong answer patterns to bounce out one of the wrong answers, and then reducing the number of choices and raising the odds of getting it right. Bubbling techniques. The 2 preferred there would be shift bubbling all the way at the end, or bubbling the spread. And putting all of these things together in the past system and doing this repetitively. There's Dad again. Doing this repetitively, right? So we can bank and earn more minutes at the end of each section, building up that surplus that we then burn in a thoughtful way using the past system that cultivates detachment and discipline, so that we really can appreciate and identify the question type that we're looking at. Because the question types will never change. The test will never change. There will be no surprises. There will only be momentary confusion that repetitive, careful examination will reveal. Look at all we learned. I think that probably should have gone first, but fair enough. All right, power move. Work with me directly. I love this. This was fun. I had fun. I love talking with you, but I want to actually meet you. I love to work with you one-on-one. I am in the tutoring trenches every day working with students. I want to work with you either here in person in Los Angeles, or I have students all around the world via Zoom. So that's my number, 424-253-5263. Give me a call. Give me a ring. If I don't pick up, I'm probably tutoring. But one of our team members would love to talk with you, and I want to meet you. So please, let's make it happen. There's other ways to interact with us well. If you're curious to learn more about simple behavioral changes that lead to big improvements in your score, you might want to check out the Cluedo test decoder system. This is just a tiny bit of the stuff we go over in the Cluedo system, which I believe is the most powerful, precise, next level test preparation method on the planet. And you can definitely learn more by going to our website, www.MightyPrep.com, by checking out us on the gram at MightyPrep, or going to our YouTube page, which is called MightyPrep as well, that has over 100 free videos, some very similar to this, with lots of tips and techniques and in-depth insights. So thank you so much. I'm going to click through to our Works Cited, where I cite some other wonderful tutors that I've used, some wonderful books that I've read. I'm all about sharing. I've benefited from the insights of some wonderful educators and test prep professionals, and I put some of my favorites in there so you can visit them and look at their work as well as some articles backing up claims they made about speed reading and all the legal stuff. Check us out on the internet. I hope to meet you in real life. Have a great day, evening, morning test experience. Bye.